I've got a business trip lined up next week. It's going to last a week. My husband announced cheerfully after coming home from work. A whole week? So far, his business trips have only lasted 2 or 3 days. 1 week seemed unusually long. This time it's abroad. Abroad? No wonder he seemed so excited. It was his first business trip overseas. Our company is planning to expand to France, and I've been chosen for the inspection. He must have landed on the fast track to promotion. Being trusted with an international project like this? Taking his words at face value, I helped him prepare diligently for the trip. My name is Alice, a 40-year-old working woman. My husband Jake is 42, 2 years my senior. We've been married for 10 years. Despite our efforts, we've been unable to conceive a child. 2 years into our marriage, we got tested and found that the issue was with Jake. I expressed my longing for a child, but Jake refused treatment, so we were unable to have a child. Still, we've managed to maintain a good relationship as a childless couple. Make sure to bring your passport yourself. 2 days before the business trip, I told him to leave his passport, which should be in his room, in the living room. The next day when I saw it properly placed there, I prepared a suitcase and I felt reassured. However, on the day of his departure, an incident occurred. As luck would have it, I had the day off from work and drove my husband to the train station. When I returned home and was about to turn on the TV in the living room, I noticed the passport still lying there. I was sure he nodded when I asked if he had taken the passport. Why was it still here? Could it be an old passport? I wondered, but upon opening it, that wasn't the case. I hurriedly tried to call my husband, but it seemed his phone was off. I sent him an email and waited, but still couldn't get through. I wondered what time his flight was. Maybe, just maybe, I could make it if I drove. I decided to call my husband's office. Luckily, my husband's senior colleague answered the phone. And when I explained, "My husband seems to have left something behind. Could you tell me what time his flight is?" He replied, "The flight should be around 10 o'clock. It was still before 9, and the airport was an hour's drive away. Even though I hadn't been able to reach my husband, I decided to take the passport and head to the airport. However, I still couldn't get through to him even after reaching the airport. I decided to wait a little longer and took a seat on an airport bench. In the 10 years since we were married, I'd never had a reason to doubt my husband. But he spent a lot of time away from home, claiming work or business trips, and I had no idea what he was doing during those times. This time too, if it was indeed an overseas business trip, he must have contacted me by now. Considering he didn't have his passport, could it be, was the business trip a lie? But when I had called the office earlier, it seemed like he really had gone on a business trip. What was going on? As I thought about these things, I started feeling irritated and decided to treat myself to a luxurious lunch alone before heading home. While I was having lunch, I tried to sort out my thoughts, but my suspicion that my husband might be having an affair only grew stronger. Normally, I don't enter my husband's room, but I made up my mind and opened that door. There, I found the dress shirts and business socks I was supposed to have packed in a suitcase. On his computer desk lay a diary. Feeling guilty, I picked up the diary and opened it. The date of today had business trip written on it. The destination was California. What does this mean? Why an overseas business trip? There was no information in the diary. I started up my husband's computer. Since I have a laptop that I use for work, I never use my husband's computer, so he probably never expected me to touch it. Without having to input any password, his computer started up. Looking through his emails, they all seemed to be work-related, nothing suspicious. I opened all the folders one by one, but nothing seemed to be of concern. Was I overthinking this? But something didn't add up. Suddenly, I decided to check his internet history. Then, I stumbled upon a shocking truth. Night fell, and I finally received a call from my husband.
"What's going on? You've been trying to contact me all day."
He sounded annoyed. Somehow I managed to stay calm and asked, "Where are you right now? You left something behind."
"I've just landed in France. What did I leave behind?"
At that moment, I thought I heard a woman's voice in the background, but I only conveyed the necessary information. "Your passport."
"What?"
Hearing my husband's flustered voice, I quickly lied. "Just kidding. You left behind one of your dress shirts. Can you manage with washing and such?" He sighed.
"I'm not a kid. I can manage with one less shirt."
Trying to sound as calm as possible, I said, "Right. Do your best on your trip," and hung up the phone. A week later, on the day my husband was to return home, I took the day off and waited at home. This week seemed both long and short at the same time, a strange feeling indeed. I was keeping a low profile in the living room when he came home in the evening. I was prepared to wait until midnight if necessary, as I wasn't sure what time he'd return. But he came back, earlier than expected. My husband walked into the dimly lit living room. "Welcome home." When I called out from the shadows, he was so surprised that he fell on his backside. "Alice, weren't you supposed to be at work? Turn on some lights at least." "I finished work, so I took the day off. I was so spaced out that I forgot to turn on the lights." That's what I said. But in truth, I just wanted to see his face when he returned from his trip with his mistress. "I'm sorry, I forgot to pack your shirts. I bet the laundry is piled up, right? I'll help you unpack." I tried to take his suitcase, but he pulled it away quickly. "There are some work documents in there. I'll unpack it myself. I'll take out the laundry later." With that, he retreated to his room. Of course, there were no work clothes in the suitcase that I had packed. He was clever enough to realize that, but still, why did he do such a thing? Did he take me for granted? After a while, he came out of the room carrying a large pile of laundry. Of course, he had rumpled the clothes he had left behind as if he had used them. Smiling, I took the clothes from him. "I'm really sorry. There were only 5 shirts for a week-long business trip, right? Were you okay?" He looked away. "Yeah, I managed washing them." As he responded awkwardly, I kept cheerfully talking to him. "Hey, didn't you bring any souvenirs?" Then he sat down on a living room chair, distancing himself from me. "I was busy. I didn't have time for that." As we talked, I prepared a beer for him. He opened the beer. I grabbed the remote and turned on a show I had recorded. "Hey, this show was on the other day. Let's watch it. It's about Yosemite National Park in California. It's so beautiful. It makes me want to go. Jake, have you ever been there?" He glanced at me, then quickly looked away and shook his head. "Nah, I've never been to California." I feigned surprise. "Really?" When I said that, he nodded. Now it's my turn to counter. I shoved the screen of my smartphone in front of him. "But you've been to Yosemite National Park, and the food was delicious, wasn't it?" What was displayed on my phone was a blog post. When I checked his computer in his room, I found a blog that he frequently visited in his internet history. Looking at the blog, I saw a family from behind. The author of the blog seemed to be a man. Between the man and the woman, there was a young boy. If you just looked at this, you could guess it was a parenting blog. But the problem was the man. I couldn't see his face, but the clothing and stance were undoubtedly my husband's. When I saw that, I panicked and hyperventilated. After a while, I managed to calm down and search for the blog on my smartphone. I bookmarked it without hesitation. Then I opened my planner. I hadn't noted down the days my husband was working overtime, but I did write down his business trip days. Comparing those dates with the dates in the blog, almost every post contained a picture featuring my husband. According to the blog, the boy is 4 years old. When I found this, I thought maybe my husband wanted a child and was having an affair with a single mother, playing house. When I showed the screen of my smartphone to my husband, his gaze stuck to the screen, frozen. "This is your blog, isn't it?" My petrified husband started to wave his hands in panic. "Huh? What are you talking about? What do you mean?" I could tell his voice was rising, and more than anger, laughter welled up within me. I pulled out my husband's casual clothes from the laundry he had given me earlier. "You wore this outfit yesterday, didn't you? Look at this picture. You're diligent, updating your blog even on a trip." I showed him another blog post. "And this outfit is the same, right?" To prevent him from making excuses, I had taken his clothes out of the chest of drawers. As I pulled out his clothes while comparing them with the blog, my husband seemed to give up, started to sob, and began to kneel down in apology. "I'm really sorry. It was just a momentary lapse. A girl I met at a bar seemed to take a liking to me, and she said she was a single mother, so I got caught up in advising her." "Oh, isn't that interesting? Taking your mistress along on a company trip? How impressive." As I looked at my husband with cold eyes, he continued without looking up. "No, you've got it wrong. She wanted to go to California, and it just so happened my business trip was to Yosemite, so we met up there." Are you serious? My husband kept his head down and begged for forgiveness. "It was just a moment of weakness. I'll break up with her. I won't see her again, so please forgive me." I let out a sigh. That's a cheap apology. With that, I placed the divorce papers in front of him. When he checked the divorce papers, he once again apologized dramatically. "I'll pay compensation money. Don't say we're breaking up." I could only sigh. Cheating for 5 years on a whim, that's half our married life. Upon hearing those words, my husband's face changed color. I continued. "So you thought if you said it was a business trip abroad, you could secure time for a family trip? Saying you're going to France but actually going to California? What's that about? At least bring your passport properly. Didn't I check whether you had your passport this morning? It seems you didn't check properly because you didn't need the passport anyway." At that, my husband looked up as if he had realized something. On the phone, you said I forgot my white shirt. That's right. I heard a woman's voice from behind you, and you lied to me that you were already at the destination. So I assumed you were lying about the passport. If you had realized that you really forgot your passport, you might have run away as it is. When I presented my husband's passport to him, he seemed to finally realize he had left it behind. My husband kept apologizing, but I didn't intend to let it end there. If you admit to cheating, you shouldn't have to lie. I showed him a certain investigation report and bank book. Interesting enough, my husband turned pale. You met her 5 years ago, and this child is now 4. It seems you acknowledged this child on your own, and have even been paying child support. When I found evidence of his affair in our bedroom, I immediately called my lawyer friend. She agreed to meet me that very day, so I took as many pictures as I could of my husband's diary, the clothes he wore in his blog posts, and headed to meet her. My friend agreed that he was undoubtedly having an affair and suggested that I hire a private investigator for more concrete evidence. The investigation confirmed without a doubt that the child was indeed my husband's secret offspring. After that, I went back home and checked my husband's bank book, only to be shocked once more. 60,000 yen was being deposited into the same account every month. The account holder's name was a woman's. It was probably child support. He used to complain about not getting raises, but it seems he was earning well enough. The money was just disappearing into child support. I might not have noticed if it weren't for this. We each managed our own bank accounts, and this wasn't the account we used for household expenses. I would never have seen it. My husband turned pale and couldn't utter a word. I showed no mercy. After all, you're not supposed to be able to have kids, right? Is that boy really yours? When I laughed and said this, my husband finally retorted, That hospital's examination must have been wrong. It was your fault we couldn't have kids. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. I've left everything to my lawyer. Thanks to you being away on a business trip to France for a week, I've gathered plenty of evidence. When I said this in a sarcastic tone, he became enraged, realizing he had no way out. I'll pay whatever compensation I owe, just get out! I picked up the voice recorder that I had left on the kitchen counter. Everything you lied about is recorded here. Bye. I had decided to bring up divorce, so I had recorded everything just in case. My husband was alternating between anger and panic. I didn't pay him any attention and walked out of the house with my bag. My husband watched me leave without much resistance, perhaps thinking I might return if he apologized again later. After all, as far as he could see, everything in the house remained untouched. I wonder when he'll open the door to my room. I've moved out all the necessary items, so my room is now completely empty. Thinking about this made me feel somewhat happy, and I returned to my company dorm. Later, I formally requested compensation from my husband, and the divorce was settled smoothly. Of course, I also received compensation from the woman he cheated with. My ex-husband was berated by his mistress for revealing their affair. However, he seemed troubled by something I had said, so he asked her if the child was really his. She replied candidly, I don't know whose child it is. At the very least, you were just a cash cow. My ex-husband sent me an email detailing his side of the story with the other women, playing the tragic hero. At first, I found it amusing, but I lost interest when I found out that he was forced to resign from his company and was living in poverty, so I blocked his emails. I have no idea what happened to him after that. I started a comfortable life in the company dorm, doing things I couldn't do while I was married, like going out for drinks leisurely and traveling with my colleagues. I'm enjoying my life.